approach worked. And he said, well, we're getting more of a realistic number, we think, because part of the problem is so many people are living in abandoned houses and they can't enter the property. So that limits their ability to find people. But yeah, they said we have a lot of volunteers. They have a few volunteers at each site, and they do that purposely because they want to overwhelm people and outnumber people that they're talking to. But I said, let me know what the count is, and also let me know if you can identify people who are still left in downtown. I also offered to take them on a walk to see some of the areas where we see people. I take Wyatt, who's here as part of the Way Community Foundation. I'm curious to see how his meeting with the county executive goes this afternoon about that.
Just having heard some of the recent chatter out of that office on that topic has been
like, welcome to the jungle, where have you been? But also, I mean, I've been participating in the home team and continuing with care meetings, and it's like,
did you see
this is your circle.
Did you see him did you see the press on Friday?
Yes, and I feel all the things, I know. And I've been going to those meetings just out of curiosity to have some understanding and learning. There's so much that I don't know, and that group has been so helpful in helping me understand and reframe how I think about things. And it's like, we manage DHS. Like, this is all we talk about.
Yes.
So, I shared that with Wyatt too.
Thank you very much for coming. Oh, you're welcome.
And Wyatt and I are one of the advocacy groups. To say, could we please get some people who have experience in some of these communities? I'm so done with, let us figure out the how about you ask them to participate in that? Let them tell you what they want. It's amazing if you just ask. So, we're going tomorrow. I'm going to try and get some people involved. But I said to Dave today, I said, we were talking about this, and I'm almost upset with myself that I care too much, in the sense that, do I care too much? Like, is this a thing? And he said, well, no, because you're the one getting the calls about how you have business. This is all you hear about, so you are. I said, okay, thank you. Because I talk about it a lot, I'm sorry. But it's just, the whole thing about it. I wish I could have got one time, because I would love to hear your thoughts and
I think we're supposed to put our mics on.
I'm listening first. Don't know what I can offer, but I can.
I guess your university's experience with the topic. Let's.
I don't think it's going to happen. And he's been doing a great job. So I know that you two are a friend. If you can.
Yeah. It wouldn't be the hardest thing I've had to do.
I love to see him dad. He's doing a really great job. It's been one of the best things I think we've done. Just like personally, professionally, it's helped us as much as it's helped him. He's family.
Yeah.
And it's just, I've talked to him over and over again. I've seen what he did, what you're facing. I'll like, what do you need? No, I'm good. I don't need it. I'll have it next week. And really, I won't even know you can ask well. No, gets like upset.
Yeah, yeah, his degree of being upset means a different kind of thing, so I'll just like put him in headlock and grab him.
Okay. Thanks.
Alright. So the agenda is discussion of public drinking in downtown Erie. And that's the whole agenda is discussing. Do we have a starting spot that anyone would like to jump in on?
Well, if we're going to be informal here, I guess I'll kick it off. I've been meeting with downtown stakeholders, including Emily and Gannon University, and Brian from the hospital and Erie Insurance, and there's concern about the impact of public drinking on, in particular, the investments that people are trying to make in the downtown in terms of trying to revitalize it and make it a real regional attraction. And so these folks are here just to offer you their experience and would like to talk about what council could do to restrict drinking, at least in the downtown. So maybe we could just start off with Emily. I know you're not you don't mind speaking up, right?
No, I'm happy to share whatever. This is what it's about. So, as a placemaking organization, the Erie Downtown Partnership is very unique in that we're really seeing a lot of what's happening morning, noon, and night in the downtown. I mean, our staff was out with people most of Saturday into the evening. And as people or as an organization who programs the park significantly, I will tell you that while we see public drinking, we actually don't see as much of it as we did pre-pandemic. We used to see a lot more open containers. We do see people that are publicly drunk. They're not necessarily walking around with open containers. And I think that's an important distinction. I mean, people that want to drink are going to find a way to drink. And we know that they're, popping tabs and drinking outside of the state stores or inside the store. And then they're walking. We haven't had very many issues with public drinking. We would be fine with looking at an ordinance. It certainly doesn't impede anything that we do. We used to do block parties. We got away from that model because of the emphasis on drinking and some of the risks associated with that. We do from time to time have pop-up vendors like Lavery or Erie Ale Works or the distillery that might pop up in the park and sell something as part of our events, but that's not something that needs to happen. So it's not critical to our ability to offer accessible family-friendly events. But our perspective has been we see less drinking occurring. We actually see more marijuana smoking. We've observed far more people walking around high. Those individuals tend to be much more aggressive and cause much more of a problem to our stakeholders and our businesses than the drunk person. I don't get calls that somebody is drunk. I get calls that somebody is high, they're aggressively panhandling, and they're disturbing and disrupting my business. And some of those individuals have mental health issues aside from that. But very rarely do we see or get comments about somebody being drunk. Very rarely. There was one gentleman who was drunk a few weekends ago who approached our skate team at the skating rink. But he was fine. He was drunk. He knew he was drunk. And he was actually asking somebody if they would buy him cough syrup. And the police came over right away, and he was fine and complied. That's a rarity. That's a rarity. And we certainly don't see drinking as much in Paris Square. We do see it 7th to 14th, where we see a lot of more, I think, elevated problems. For the most part, we feel pretty safe in Paris Square. And the police have been really good too, as far as noting what our events are, being visible, having a good relationship with them, and being able to communicate. That's kind of what we've experienced.
So this isn't like people at bars, like on Saturday, Friday night, you're talking about. This is during the day, all day, like during regular business hours.
Yeah.
Basically.
If you're talking about like disturbances, yeah.
Emily, do you know if anybody ever is cited for marijuana with the ticketing function that City Council approved a long 5 years ago? Do you know if anybody gets cited for possession of small amounts?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because I had asked a few years ago, and there were no statistics even as to whether they were even keeping track of it. So I don't know if anybody gets cited.
And there are groups, we've talked about this with police. I mean, we know the small group of people that are doing it, and I will say that they are lovely in the sense that they're very polite. They leave everybody alone, right? Like they're not, you can smell the marijuana, but they're not acting up or being loud or being rude. But we do have people that are high on other things that are extremely aggressive, and I would say scary. And I've experienced some of those things firsthand. It's a very unsettling place to be at, and they have occurred while I'm just walking down the street. And somebody approaches me. And when they approach me, it's different than if they approach a man. It's, hey, can I have a hug? Like, they pursue you and follow you. Yeah. And really try and get you to, you know, I need money, I need this. And that's rough. The 10th and 11th Street corridor sees a lot more drinking. They see a lot more presence of unhomed individuals. They're seeing a lot more people actively high. And it's really something. I think what you were talking about, Dave, yesterday about possibility of cameras on the street pools, that would be, I would say, absolutely essential. You know, we have the brick that was thrown through Cafe 710. We do know that leading up to that, she had been sort of terrorized by an individual who is in a shelter, but has a lot of mental health issues. And then around the corner from there, Samir's Market has had a plethora of issues, including earlier this month. I mean, I'm getting calls and emails from the property owner saying, please, Emily, please help me. Accompanied by video of what he perceives as an unhomed individual. I'm not sure he is, pursuing a customer in the store to the point that it's so aggressive you think a gun is going to be pulled out at any moment. And there's a small child, probably 5 years old, with her mother at the back of the store. So you can see this video playing out from different perspectives. And it's like, that's what our businesses are up against. So I personally think it's about so much more than drinking. And I don't think that having an ordinance is really going to solve our problem. It might make it easier to enforce, but I think we have so many things that need triage that we really need a working plan to triage those things. And I think we can at least start. It doesn't have to be a perfect plan, but I would like to see some sort of movement where we do something and we just keep moving. We don't think about like the perfect thing or like the total has to be just the right thing. I think we just need to do something, do it really well, and then do something else. Because I think we're going to see businesses lose out in the end, and our downtown's going to lose at the end. And for us, it's really hard to sell people on downtown and try and provide family-friendly activity and not know what they're going to experience when they're in downtown. That's always been very tricky. And during the pandemic, it's, you know, come downtown, there's all this investment, there's all these businesses, there's all these amazing culinary experiences. And we did have this spring, I thought things felt really unusually weird. We saw a lot more aggressive panhandling. We had a few gentlemen that go up to people in their cars, at stoplights when you got into your car, and they weren't asking nicely. They weren't asking for money nicely. It was scary. We have people who are not a threat, who are held up in front of businesses asking for money. Raymond is one of those people. Raymond is a lovely. He's always asking for money. He's always like right outside of the business. He gets money. He gets a lot of help. He gets a lot of compassion. There's just a lot there. But drinking, I would say, from what we observe, is very low on our list. That is the least of our problems as far as how it impacts businesses or the events that we're having. Nobody that's drunk is really disturbing people directly, I should say. Whereas if you're high or you've got other things going on, you are directly disturbing and disrupting business from happening or families from coming downtown. We've seen that at our farmers markets. I could go on and on, but
Yeah.
we have some very specific things that happen
I got it.
that are wild.
maybe the public drinking is not such a big deal because the rest of the environment is so dysfunctional in comparison, but in a normal
Yeah.
circumstances, perhaps it would be more
I
problematic.
think one of the biggest challenges is the fact that, people that don't have addresses, if they're in care, at some point they're released. And if they say they're from Erie, guess what? They're getting dropped off in Perry Square. And I know that, Hammond, their emergency room department, and God love them. I know winter was so hard for them, and they really did a wonderful thing by deciding, like, look, we're not going to release these people into the elements. We're not going to do that. But the effect of that, there's just got to be a better way. But we do know that there are hospitals and care institutions that drop people off in Perry Square, and we have interacted with some of those individuals, and I don't even know where they are. How'd you get here? Oh, you just dropped me off. Well, where were you? I was in Warren. I was in Louisville. Well, how'd you get here? Well, I said I needed to go to Erie, so they just dropped me off. And one young gentleman was, very disturbed and was trying to, participate in our farmers market. It was literally scaring people away. I could see the horror on families' faces. But so we see so much, and I think unlike our partners maybe at the EDDC, they have the advantage of walls. They own space where they can control, but we're working within the public space. So we do believe in creating a downtown that's safe and welcoming for all. It gets really tricky in certain circumstances, but we do try and we take it pretty seriously.
Yeah.
Well,
I know that's a lot more than just drinking, but I wanted to paint a whole picture.
yeah. So just a couple comments there. So, Erie's going through this renaissance, and everything that's being done, all this development and more urban living, and so, all the retail spaces, and so you're in an urban environment and there's a lack of green space. So you have this gem that's right in the center of the city. There's been a big investment there. And so all those people that are living downtown, if they want to experience green space, you either have the Bayfront or you have Perry Square. And it's only going to take a few bad experiences for people to say, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't want to come downtown. I don't want to experience the businesses. And then we start degrading again, which affects the tax base. And, from the Hammett perspective, we're experiencing the downtown in a couple of different ways. So one, we're serving the community. Everybody ends up at our ED, and so when you have these situations, we're not going to turn anybody away. But when you have, people that are drinking all day long, it creates problems. Injuries, altercations, those end up in the ED. But then you also have to think about, so between us and Gannon and Erie Insurance, there's thousands of people that are working in the downtown area. And so, especially in the summer and the fall when the weather's decent, we want to experience the downtown area. But you start having those bad experiences, and then people are just going to neglect going uptown, and you just have this ripple effect, and it ends up being bad for the city. So I think after our meeting, we were talking about, well, who else allows public drinking in public parks?
Isn't it like only 11 or 13 cities?
Oh, it's very small.
Nationwide,
And so in some of these, you can read anything on the internet, but the thing that just kept coming up was when everybody looked at Pennsylvania and who allowed in Pennsylvania, Erie, PA, Erie, PA, Erie, PA, and it's like, do we want to be in that minority, and why do you want to allow it? So what benefit is there from it? So unless it's an organized situation where somebody's getting a permit, for an event, that at least you can control it. But without an ordinance, there's no way for the police to enforce it. So.
Can I just ask Emily a follow-up question before you got to that about the drop-off problem? Do you have a list of the groups that are doing that? Because Emily knows, I told her once, this wasn't a drop-off at Perry Square, but it was a guy from Philadelphia who had just completed drug rehab at a place up near McKinley School. And he was in the incarcerated part of the drug rehab program, never saw anything outside the drug rehab place. He was dropped at Greyhound, and I think this was even before they closed the Greyhound, you know, where you can get a ticket there. He missed the bus. He had no money, no phone, and it was a long story, but I helped him. Finally, the drug rehab people came and drove him to Pittsburgh. Took him it was going to take him 18 hours to get to Philadelphia. And I thought, why would you drop somebody off without making sure they were getting on the bus? So that's why I'm wondering if you have a list.
I have a list of a few organizations that okay, this is interesting.
Yeah.
And that's like a bigger topic, but you know, there's all these components at play. And sometimes I will tell you, it's hard to discern, is somebody drunk or are they unwell? I mean, we run into that too. You, from a distance, say, oh my God, they must be drunk or something. And then you start talking to them and you're like, well, I don't smell alcohol. No, there's something else going on here.
Yeah, I wanted to echo something Brian said, which is, you know, and kind of play off what you said as well, which is that, you know, drinking is part of the whole spectrum of problems that are out there. But here's one that we can control as a city, and the public drinking doesn't appear to be adding any value, at least in the downtown. I mean, I can't think that it's adding anything. So why not restrict it?
Well, certainly in a public park, you know, so
Right.
I don't know what the city defines as a public park, but I would think Perry Square defined as a public park. And so, again, we're the exception here. But, you know, the other thing, and I think we talked about this in our meeting on Monday, is if somebody's drinking all day long, sooner or later they're going to have to go to the bathroom. And so we have these bathrooms in Perry Square, but sometimes they're locked and sometimes they're not. So you're going somewhere. And so where are people relieving themselves? And you know, then there's the stench of that, and you know, that's a detractor of the area. And why do people want to go in the park when that's going on, or that aroma's in the air? Just detracts from the experience.
I do want to follow up with a bit of solution here. So the Erie Downtown Partnership, and some of you are aware of this, we did get together a package of funding to do an energize and engage public space plan. And the whole purpose of that plan is to focus on economic vitality and quality of life downtown. We think restrooms are going to play a big role in that, but we're looking at Perry Square, Griswold Park, who has an abundance of issues, and a third site. And that third site, we believe, will be a site that will be a public space that will be created, that's hiding in plain sight. It might be somewhere in the 10th or 11th Street corridor, but we want this to be a very community-led process. I think if we want democratic parks, we have to have democratic processes. And you have to understand how people want to use their public spaces. Placemaking is what we do. We've shopped this idea and worked with people for the last couple of years, and now we're ready to expand on that and advance that. We need to work closely with council on that, you know, with Dave and his department. But I think restrooms, we do have some money right now available to help design a restroom concept in Perry Square. We would be happy to look at grants for other restroom solutions. We had one a few years ago. We got a national grant. It got a lot of national attention, and we couldn't get approval from anybody to let us place it in the downtown. So we've asked for an extension, and we've repackaged that idea, and we actually call them comfort kiosks. We think they should be so much more than a restroom, but we have money that we're willing to put towards solutions, all that to say that, and we're pretty serious about it. We want to be strong collaborators. We want to help make the downtown accessible, sociable, comfortable, welcoming. That's really important. And that is, you know, for everybody's comfort, not just a few. So we have solutions, and we want to see people give us their ideas of what they want to see, what they want to do. We know that so many families use the fountain. And unfortunately, the east side of Perry Square Park is where a lot of that drinking or weed smoking and cigarette smoking in general occurs. If you pay attention, you see a lot of little kids running around there, and it always upsets me. That's that's what we give them, that's what those kids deserve. So just really looking at what kind of infrastructure, what kind of amenities, what kind of programming do we need to change that narrative? And it's gonna take time.
Well, I think this committee can certainly be a forum
Yeah.
for further discussion about all those
Sure.
things as those plans develop.
Yeah.
Doug, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, Doug, do you have anything?
Yeah.
Emily, I think you very thoughtfully encapsulate a lot of the complexities of the problem. It's not just public drinking that is the issue. It's that plus a half dozen or more other things.
The multiplier.
For Gannon and and I've been a citizen of this community for 25 years. Gannon doesn't have its own quad, where its students can go and gather and Perry Square could be something where we extend our population into that area and use it in a potentially nicer way, or at least have our community engaged more in the community that surrounds it. Given some of the interactions that we have, we don't try to encourage that.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but how would you must have thought about encouraging that.
I mean, we don't have a lot of open green space inside our campus. Yeah, and so you could design programming that's actually in the park and have our student experience folks host those events and monitor those events. Our police are partners with the Erie Police, so they can, help maintain things. I think there's opportunity there just to engage our student population in a way that with the city that would be even more, maybe not as productive as how they engage in our West Bayfront, but in helping to reform and build. But there is just creating a little more inviting atmosphere would help. Because the problem when people need to go to the bathroom, they go to the bathroom in our parking ramps, and they set up, there's a parking ramp that's attached to South Hall, where until we rebuilt the RCWE building in the South Hall, the basement of that parking ramp was essentially a homeless shelter or tent city. And we've been trying to re-educate and learn to live with that situation as best we can. Most people are fine once you tell them, but there are others, and one of my own employees, was bitten by a dog by probably someone who is unhomed, is a nice phrase you're using, in our parking ramp if she was trying to come to work. And so
I just want to say one thing though about the bathrooms. It's not just homeless, for people who are homeless who have to go to the bathroom.
No.
Because Emily mentioned the young families down there, and
Don't get me started on
don't
this.
get me started now.
Don't get me
On
started.
taking out that McDonald's, I was there when McDonald's was still around, and I saw a mom, and you have grandkids now, we both have grandkids. When you gotta go, you gotta go. And so the mother was like, oh, I went down to McDonald's. We don't have that now. So, and that's not a comment on the fact that,
Right.
I don't know what you do then, where you go, but.
Well, I think part of the problem is, we need something to blame, and also it's like, okay, it's not McDonald's responsibility to provide restrooms for the public. It's our responsibility.
But there is nowhere, at least that was a,
And we need a
option,
solution. We need a solution. I mean, the fact that we're Erie and you have one public restroom at Bicentennial Tower, which is open seasonally, and good luck if it is open, by the way. I mean, yeah, for families, for people visiting that are walking downtown, for the residents, many of whom are elderly, I mean, there's no good restroom solution. And I think that's a real shame. And
Well,
I
you might
might.
have one.
Well, yeah, I've been chomping at the bit for years. I'm ready to go.
I would be supportive of a public restroom in Erie Square or the downtown somewhere, but I wouldn't want it to facilitate public drinking,
Right.
right?
When
So,
you say public
Yeah.
restroom, what do you mean, like?
I mean
bodies,
a
like-
permanent solution that is a family-friendly restroom, that is clean, that is a permanent piece of infrastructure.
Okay.
Not
Would it be,
porta-johns.
would somebody be like assigned to it to like, cause I
Yeah.
can envision like, you know, something like you're saying, a structure,
Mhm, mhm,
but with somebody who's like employed
mhm,
with maybe some security too.
Yeah.
And there's bathrooms in there,
mhm.
people can,
And I think that's something
You know
that
what I
we
mean?
would be willing to collaborate with our ambassador team. But I just feel like, you know, and I've said this to the mayor, I mean, if you want to become a world-class city, and you don't have public restrooms, like nice public restrooms for people, you have Celebrate Erie, you have all these things going on, and you don't have restrooms, it's just such low-hanging fruit. So just know that we have money we want to put to this, we have ideas, we want to be good collaborators, we want to be hyper-collaborative with the city, because you own those spaces, we don't. But if we can bring solutions, if we can help get funding, we want to do that. We are on board.
Do we have more opinions about the alcohol issue?
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
other than drinking so much that you have to go pee and having nowhere to go pee.
Well, it's,
How would it affect your students? Because I mean, I live on 9th Street. I know I watch kids with open containers walking all over my block. Not my block, but about 2 away from it. I'm on the 600 block, so it kind of stops about that point. I mean, are you worried about how that would work with citations against your students or anything like that? Or is that something you're hoping to curb as a campus, have less
one,
drinking?
they shouldn't be out there behaving that way. You know, we do try, I think it would only take a couple of enforcement opportunities for the city to re-educate those students. You know,
Is that an opportunity for re-education that you're hoping for?
by and large, I think it's the same, you know, probably the people you see drinking are probably the same few people. You know, it's not every student. You can't paint everybody in a community with the same brush. And it is something that we teach, and we try to have our res life, our police force, and everyone look for. You know, it's.
I mean, I'm not
But
going to say
when-
whether or not I've beaten them at flip cups while walking my dog, but you know, like, is it something that you're hoping to curb on your campuses, the outdoor, you know, Saturday afternoon, public
Well, you had, you
consumption,
know, a
open
challenge.
containers?
There's no simple answer to it.
Okay.
I mean, it is, you know, on Saturday afternoons in the fall, you have, you know, our sanctioned tailgate that's right across the street from the football field. But those aren't students; those are adults that are all drinking.
Yeah.
Who, you know, and Erie, for its part, you know, we sanction, you know, the bar stool open, you know, and allow people to walk up and down the street and essentially teach them that it's okay to drink in public, at least on one day, if not every day. And so it's, you know, what kind of events are we going to allow, and what does that say? You know, but I would start at, you know, what problem are we trying to fix? Emily paints several problems that we need to address. You know, is this the best first place to start working on any of those?
You know, and does it really, you know, is it anywhere in the city limits, or is it in public parks, or is it both? You know, I think that's part of it. You know, you have to
How does
define
the
what's the
dining-
geography of it all.
And how does the dining on the sidewalks fit into this, and where do you draw lines? And
it seems like we're talking about downtown though, mostly, because I don't think we're talking about neighborhoods. Because people aren't coming in just going in other neighborhoods.
Sure.
We're talking about people coming downtown, right? So I think that's where we're focusing at. And I know you said drinking was like low on the totem pole. So you were saying
For
the
us,
other
it's-
things are the, you know,
Yeah.
have we looked at like other cities? Because as you spoke about Erie, you know, going through a renaissance, other cities must have already gone through this. So what have they done? Like, can we research and look what's other cities doing to fix these, to help fix these
Well, we know,
problems?
I mean, we know they're not, for the most part, allowing public drinking.
Mhm.
I mean, we do know that.
Right.
Whether that's the secret to their success, probably not,
Mm-hmm.
but it probably might help.
Mhm.
And for me, you know, this is the low-hanging fruit. You know, the things that you're talking about, and the public restrooms might be low-hanging fruit as well. The homeless population or the unhomed, that's a little bit tougher. The drug addiction, the mental illness, those are tougher things. But, you know, for me, what can we do in the short run to make it incrementally better? I think curbing the public drinking is something we can do in the short run that's incrementally better.
What do you think about the smoking in the parks? Because city council never actually completed that ban on smoking, and I met a guy.
Okay, they never
I was on
did,
jury
okay.
duty, I was walking through,
Yeah.
I had my city hall
Okay.
badge on, he's like,
Yeah.
you know, I like to drink in the park, but I don't like the fact that the people sitting
Yeah.
next to me are smoking. I mean, he was dead serious.
Yeah,
and he
smoking's a
wanted-
big issue.
Yes.
I've been in at least one community that banned smoking in the parks, and the argument that drove that was that kids should not have to suffer
Right.
the secondhand smoke.
Yeah, there's
And
like
so-
200 municipalities in Pennsylvania that participate in young ones that play.
And so that should have been, I mean, in my opinion, that should have been an easy vote.
I think one of the problems though is, for instance, if you talk to Beacon Communities in Richford Arms, you know, they have a invisible fence around Richford Arms. They say no smoking within a certain amount of feet. Well, where are they gonna go? Your insurance has the same thing. Where do they go? I'll tell you. And it's just, it's very hard to, like, unless we're gonna, to us though, I mean, yeah, we're having story time in the park and you've got, you know, Barb over there smoking and you can't tell people to move. Celebrate Erie was a big deal and they finally said for Celebrate Erie, this is a smoke-free zone. But people still light up, they throw their butts, and of course, we're picking up butts left and right. That's the bulk of our litter.
I think
Yeah.
where it was left, but it was right before COVID, was that they were supposed to be designated, I think that's what council had
Yeah.
requested. Then I
Some
think this
areas.
got forgotten in, or low priority
Mm-hmm.
because of COVID stuff.
Now, Liz, I'm curious, why are you bringing up the smoking in tandem with the
Because they
drinking?
were kind of together,
Mhm.
you know, when, previously on council, before Chuck was on, the objections would be some of the things that Emily mentioned. It's the regulation, that's why I was bringing it up, like, you know, can you regulate? And even the drinking, you mentioned, you know, what do you consider a public park? Well, people said, hey, we have, graduation parties or birthday parties at Glenwood Park, and people want to be able to drink there. So
All right,
a
well,
total
maybe-
ban would be hard. But I'm just bringing up the smoking thing, because
Yeah.
it was never fulfilled. You know, we went down this road, I was arguing in favor
Well,
of it,
well,
and then we're
that's-
supposed to have
Yeah.
designated smoking. I don't think it ever happened.
That seems like,
But I think especially, I mean, for me, and I'm not a smoker, but I mean, anything that's city owned, I don't think people should be allowed to smoke or drink necessarily on property that's maintained by taxpayers. I think with all due respect to your insurance and others in the community, if you don't want smoking in your area or on your property, we too should have the luxury of not having that on our property, which is owned essentially by the community. And I think I think there's so many things that are kind of being missed with where we want to go. We have all these plans, but we just don't do the thing that's the right thing
Well.
to do.
I mean, it'd be interesting to gather data on all that. So look at all the cities,
Yeah.
municipalities in Pennsylvania, you
Mhm.
know, what percentage allow public
Yeah.
drinking, what
Mhm.
allow public smoking, you know? So like, when you look at those things, you know, why do we want to be in the minority? What's the reason that we want to have that? You know, it kind of reminds me years ago, so down at Hannah, so I run the facilities department, So we had an incinerator, and we incinerated everything there, trash and debris, and it was a very efficient process. They'd done it for 30 years. But it came to the point where we had to redo all of that, and so we did a study on what should we do, and we looked at all the different aspects of cost and capital investment, pollution, and we got to the point, part of that study was like, well, we were like one of the last 10 hospitals in the country that has an incinerator, and the public perception was not good of it. The pollution, even though it had all these controls on it and all these filters, it's like, why do we want to invest $2 million? That thing's going to be around for 25 more years, and people are like pointing at our smokestack and saying, they're incinerating, they're polluting, whether we're filtering it or not. Like, why do we want to be, the poster child for that? I think this is kind of the same thing.
Yeah. And it's just pushing around people, right? Because nobody wants smoking, so the natural place is, we can smoke in the park, we can smoke there.
Whether it's any kind of substance abuse you're having, whether it's drinking or smoking marijuana or doing narcotics, all that kind of feeds off each other, whether it's smoking or drinking or drug use.
That's it.
You're creating that environment where people who are addictive are all coming together to be addictive. It's just a different form of addiction.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it.
Oh, and I just wanted to remind you, the other objection when we tried to tackle the alcohol problem was that, say, Frontier Park, people would always bring up, well, are you going to go and crack down on people who are drinking during the jazz festival? So just so you know, that is.
Well, they could get a special permit.
Yeah, there's
right.
a
I'm
thing
just
to be
inviting what was said before. I'm not advocating one way or the other.
Right.
But do you want all that going on when all the 7-year-olds are running around playing soccer? Because they have a pretty big soccer league there.
That was all the first council meeting in June in 2019. You can see some of the citizens be heard. It was entertaining.
I remember.
You guys have not said a whole lot about this, so I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I think I've said a few things.
Go ahead.
I'm curious about if we look at bigger cities and their downtown. Like, usually it seems like their downtown is a place like, if I lived here, I'd have to travel to it, so it'd take me a distance to get there. So I think Erie's unique. We want to build up the downtown, but it's very easy for people who can walk, who are, they can. It's 5 minutes away from where. So I think in a bigger city, it would be easier to try to keep people out of the downtown, because if I lived in Chicago, for example, in a neighborhood, it might take me 30 minutes to get to downtown, and I got to go on the highway, and so I'm just not walking there. Whereas in Erie, I might live up on, East 8th Street, walk over, drink in the park. You know what I mean?
And it's the high rises. I mean,
Yeah,
as much
it's
as I like
the
having a
people
beer
living
in my
down.
backyard,
They
that's
live in the
backyard.
place where you're trying to build up. So how are you gonna? You know what I mean? Whereas maybe in a bigger city, they might live 40 minutes away from where you're.
And when she's talking about 7th to 14th Street, I mean, the real big spot of that is 9th Street. I mean, it's 9th Street between Toledo Towers and Midtown Towers.
Mhm.
There's a beer slushy store,
Right.
and that's where the guy, that's where a lot of the concentration of problem happens. But it's the housing as much as it's the facilities of where to drink at. So, I mean, and are they drinking publicly on that? Yeah, I mean, there's some people drinking publicly. Honestly, when we're talking about why it's shut down, why it's decreased, I can tell you why it's decreased. I can tell you the names of which guys and where they moved to, and which guys stopped drinking as much. Thanks for hiring them. There's, so I mean, so a lot of it, and the thing is, back then when you had 12 people, I mean, it was a group of 12 guys, and when they moved to Phoenix, a bunch of them. And, it just ended. I'm not ended, but it got to the point where you can say, well, it's a measurably different situation.
Yeah.
In 19, when the ordinance was posted, I mean, it was pretty much trying to put those 12 guys and get the probations revoked and get them out of the streets as much as possible and into jails. And that's the end game of that, an end game that I'm not real comfortable with. So and that's why I like to bring it up in the context of the kids on the 200 block of West 9th Street, crossing the street back and forth with their flip cup tables out. Like that's the, they're at risk in that situation just as much with stuff that we don't want on their records either. But I'm relieved to hear, you talk more about the systems of the issues and the fact that we spent, a 45-minute meeting, we spent most of it talking about where people have to relieve themselves after drinking too much rather than the actual ordinance itself. I mean, I think some of the problems we're looking at are, I see it as an issue that's, while some are saying low-hanging fruit, I see it as a lower priority.
Well, what's the downside of restricting it?
The downside is that when it was suggested back in 2019, it was only downtown parks. So the idea was that we were going to target people in our most disinvested, our most vulnerable constituents. We were going to be targeting them so that they couldn't drink outside anymore from their high-rise buildings. They weren't worried about me drinking in Frontier Park during Jazz and Blues Fest. It was just those people, because us people don't like seeing those people drinking.
And that's how they refer to them as, those people.
Yeah.
And I have to remind people, those people live in Richford Arms.
Yeah.
They're not homeless.
Yeah.
And we misidentify a lot of people based on how they look.
Yeah.
Because we just don't know. We don't get to know them. And it's amazing what happens when you just get to know people. But
The smoking designation thing, that the part that was designated was the part that was closest to Erie Insurance's
Right.
campus, so that they still had somewhere to smoke. That was really that was the quiet part out loud. Every part of it just seems so targeted to people that I don't like seeing targeted.
I think that's the bigger issue.
Yeah.
I think that's the bigger issue. We don't like the way certain things look or feel, but we also don't really have any real solutions to addressing them. We need something to blame, so we look at an ordinance and we say, well, that's the reason this is happening. I don't think that's the case, and I think that while it's something we should explore, and I try and come at everything, be very open, I think there are a lot of other things that we would see far more gains in pursuing than just.
Do you think
Yes.
generationally though, I wanted to ask Doug kind of the question you're talking about, the tailgaters weren't necessarily the students, the sanctioned tailgaters. So as you've tried to attract younger people to live downtown, do you think that it would be more acceptable now if for the younger generation to say, yeah, we don't just think that you should go live in a city and be able to walk around with open containers? I mean, my husband Eric is appalled. He's like, you can't do that in New York City. I can't believe you could do that. So do you think that there's been enough of a shift, and that, maybe younger people aren't thinking, we have to just go get drunk every weekend? I remember drinking with Doug one time so in front of all the
We talk about that later.
Yeah. No.
Maybe afterwards with some drinks.
It was but it was just, no, I just wonder, has there been enough of a culture shift that saying it doesn't want to be a place of open containers, at least not downtown, that it would be more acceptable now? Because COVID changed things in terms of like how people socialize even. I just am wondering if the moment might be more ripe now than it was even a couple of years ago to get by it. I'm putting the whole burden on Doug.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I think your point about targeting, certain populations is right. If you were to live in Richford Arms, where would you go? We probably all have the benefit of having a porch or a backyard or a place where we can, that's not inside our house, where we can visit with friends and have we as a community created enough of those places for everyone. But I do think how we have all behaved and the events we host and the things we allow to have happen model behavior for everyone else. The college kids will had no problem walking with an open container from Coconut Joe's back to their dorm or back to their place on 6th Street. Yeah, because they saw it at the bar stool open. They saw us do it from, and so where I end up on it is, I think you are all going to explore this a great deal and give it more thought. It's, is there something you do a test either in Perry Square or someplace that, does it work here and can you scale it? The research of other cities and what's acceptable, do you become more discerning about, the events that are held and, we had, you have an industry in town where there's 8, 9 microbreweries. We do a lot to encourage drinking.
Yep.
And, and it's good for commerce, good for business, but is it good for our city business?
What are those others? What do they do in those? If you're other cities, if you're drinking, like if you in New York City, you said you're walking down the street with it.
They would seize it.
They just take the alcohol from you.
Summary
do they arrest you
fines.
Give you a citation, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why.
So do these people that are doing this?
That's
I don't know. It might be a student one time, right?
Yeah, no, but that's why
it might be a.
So I used to drink in public all the time in St. Louis. This is being broadcast, isn't it? Right? Like when I was in college, that's why we brown bagged it. Like you couldn't visibly have an open container of alcohol. So that's why you put it in a brown bag. That's like the actual term of why people make that reference to drinking.
Right.
Except for here, you don't have to put it in the brown bag. You're allowed to drink out of the bottle, legally.
I'm showing my age, I think. I just don't see how public drinking is a good, a societal good. I don't,
That was tailgating for baseball games or Mardi Gras, St. Louis.
Well, I think there's a place for outdoor drinking that's regulated. A festival or something like that. But I just don't see how it is a public good to allow folks to walk around outside with a bottle of beer and walk down the street. It just floors me.
And my question is it a public good to be punitive against people that do that?
Well,
I'm not saying it's good to drink.
Well,
I'm asking if it's good to punish people that are drinking.
Well, if you have a law, presumably it's going to have to be enforced.
Right.
Right. So, if you speed, you get a ticket.
Right.
And if you have a law that prohibits public drinking, you're going to get a ticket.
Yeah. I'm not advocating for public drinking. I'm advocating against punitive reaction to public drinking.
But that's not punitive reaction. That's simply enforcing.
That's
the law.
enforcing what you're saying. But you're going to have to, and then you're going to have, when you're arresting people or giving them citation, that's going to turn into some people who are really nice. Okay, some people are going to turn into that guy you were saying earlier. That's going to turn into a disorderly conduct with, somebody on the ground. I don't know.
Well, a good model would be, I didn't go to any of the Sunset concert series at Presque Isle last year,
Mhm.
but, the Presque Isle, you are not allowed to drink at Presque Isle, and the rangers there just come up to people and say, they come up and say, you can't drink if you put your stuff away, otherwise we're going to make you leave the park. So I think, isn't there a level between like enforcement and arresting and tapping on the shoulder and saying, you weren't allowed to do that here. So I don't know. It would just be, I always like the fact that there aren't like a lot of drunks at Presque Isle, to tell you the truth. Even, at a concert series, people think, you can actually just be here and enjoy the state park. So we have a model where.
Yeah, but I think the other thing you might want to try to do some research on is people who went that path. And so what did they do with enforcement? So like we put the ordinance in place, we made people aware, we had public announcements about it, but we weren't really cracking down really hard in the beginning. We just allowed people to slowly understand the change. And I'm sure there's some people that did it, some municipalities that did it and said, yeah, we just went hardcore and it went really bad. Here's a better way to do it. You know, you want to ease into it. You know, it's kind of like when Hammond said we're going with non-smoking. You know, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of research about that, and how do we do it, and how punitive are we going to be with staff who are doing it, and you know, we kind of eased into it because you just don't want to create a bigger problem. To your point, you know, like, you know.
No, I think that's wise, and that would be how you would do it. You would just say, excuse me, sir, but the city just passed an ordinance, and you can no longer drink in public.
Liz, I think to your,
Do you know how many years ago was that?
I bet it was at least 10, because I think it happened prior to our affiliation with UPMC.
I think to your point about somebody tapping somebody on the shoulder, and I mean, working in a school building myself, or working as, you know, I think one police officer or one principal a police officer might see someone run a red light and say, hey, you know, you saw you just did that, right? And they talk to you about it. Whereas another police officer's temperament is different. Just like in the school building, you know, some people are able to say, hey, you're not supposed to be wearing a hood in school, come on. You know? And some people say, nope, you're going to the office. So I think that's all going to depend on the personality of each person you're dealing with. Because some people are, nope, this is the rule, this is going to happen. Some people are, hey, I know you're here every day, I'm here every day. Let's try to develop a rapport. It all depends on somebody's personality when it comes to that. And sometimes we hurt each other that way too, because if we put a rule in and everybody's not, you know, we talk about that a lot in school about that we don't want kids doing this, but then one teacher says, well, in my room that doesn't really matter. My kids get along and I let them do that. Whereas another one is, nope, this is the rule. And so now the kids start to like one person and not the other person. I mean, so everybody's got to kind of be consistent. You know, if whatever you go with, you got to be. Because one person can be looked at as good guy, bad guy, good girl, bad girl for you, Liz. You know. But I'm going to add that in there. But, you know, just, you know, some people might look at it and, well, I like Liz because when she deals with me, she taps me on the shoulder. She doesn't just arrest me the first time. Emily, she saw me and put me. I mean, you know what I mean? So we got to look at that too.
Yeah.
If you're going to put something in place, you know, everybody's not wired the same every time.
Well, I mean, police officers generally do use discretion, and
Yeah.
I think particularly when rolling out a new ordinance, you know, to your point, Brian, I think that's a real good opportunity to just go slow.
Yeah. You know, and you're going to want their input, you know, so what does it do to them? Like, hey, you know, we don't have enough people to enforce this, you know, so.
Right.
You know, I think what's the nice thing about this conversation is you've got differing opinions, and it flushes out all those things that you need to consider. You're making an informed decision, so I don't know that a decision is going to get made here tonight, but I think all these viewpoints are really great because there's a bunch of different angles in there. So, you know, if you're going to make any kind of decision, it really should be well thought out, and all the pros and all the cons, because nothing's ever a slam dunk.
And Dave, you're approaching it as looking at, you said, what is the public good of drinking, but also kind of Emily is like, what's the public good of what we want to accomplish in public parks and downtown specifically? So how do you make it better for everybody instead of like, we're going to try and go be punitive against the people who are homeless? You know what I mean? It sounds like you have reframed it from the discussion a few years ago.
Yeah,
Like,
sometimes you change the behavior by changing what happens there.
Okay.
People get the
Yep.
message.
Yep. I got to run, everybody. I got to go watch
So,
basketball game.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yep. Thank you, guys.
And Doug, you were talking about like getting more college students down there, these things like changing the mix also has an impact on like a vibe of a place?
Of course, yeah, I think when you change, the environment, I think you then change, it's not just the students coming in, I mean, you also are trying to attract,
Like attracts like.
attracts like, but also, Perry Square should be a community space for the entire community, not just the few blocks around it.
And wouldn't it be great to have all of those people integrating and use that for community building space? I mean,
And
I
that
know for
happens.
Church Arms, they want to do stuff there. They love to have barbecues and have like picnics together as a building. That is their backyard. But right now, they're not allowed to do that. I mean, we've just been so,
What do you mean they're not allowed to do that?
well, I mean, they can't have like an open barbecue or grill or anything. But even if it was somehow contained, or they could get a special permit, I mean, that is truly their backyard. So it's almost like we're teasing them by saying, hey, you got onto this beautiful green space, but
Well,
can't really use it.
I actually don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
You know, I really don't. I'm kind of surprised that,
Okay, well,
I'm surprised that the city would not allow some kind of permit.
well, I mean, same with
To
us.
do that, I mean,
We love to
you-
have s'mores in the park.
What,
Can't.
Well,
can't do-
Barbecue Fest, obviously there's open flames at that, there's
But-
permits allowed for it somehow.
Yeah. But I think sometimes we work too hard at keeping a few out that we tend to keep everybody out. And I just think we need to be really thoughtful in how we approach this. Not that we aren't. I think this is an amazing first step. But just, for me, it's like if you're going to say drinking is a problem here, I'm going to be one of those people that is going to say, I don't want to smell cigarettes smoke when I'm enjoying this park. I don't want to smell weed. I want to bring my kid here to story time.
Right.
And to me, that has more of a health impact than somebody drinking next to me. Secondhand smoke is more dangerous. So I think you're going to get a lot of people that push back against that and say, yeah, you can shoot up in Perry Square,
Well,
you
then
can't, but.
if we go down that
We're
path,
doing it.
if we go down that path,
Yeah.
then we'll never get
Yeah.
anything accomplished, right? Because we'll never be able
But
to
that's
satisfy
the thing, there's so many
everybody's.
things happening, and
There-
to your point, they really do play off each other. They really do. And you said it very well, yeah. I think this is a great conversation. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. I
Mhm.
think you all bring really key perspective to this topic. It's a biggie. There's a lot of emotion involved in this kind of stuff.
I don't know.
And I'm actually surprised we don't have more people here to talk about this, because I know
Yeah.
there's stakeholders that have very strong opinions.
Yes,
But,
I'm sorry about that. I am sorry about that.
Well, we had a good conversation nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, our chairman has left, so I guess that's a
Yeah.
signal that the meeting's over.
I'm not even on that committee, like, literally, there's no one from the committee.
Like I said, the utility, you're just gonna fill in whenever the council members can.
We were playing shortstop tonight. I'm Brian, by the way. Chuck, nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we should have done an introduction.
Figure you're not fast enough.
You know, Doug?
No.
Doug, I'm sorry, can you introduce yourself?
Hi,
I'm shocked.
I'm Doug O'Hara, I'm the chief of staff at Gannon University and the director of marketing and communications. And Liz and I spent many years, 2 decades, working together at Erie Times News before I went over to Gannon.
Yeah, everybody's like communications people from Erie Times News. So I work here and then I work a few blocks out and then I live a few blocks out, but it's all one big triangle around Gannon.
Oh, very
It's not.
You run into a lot of us, and if you have ideas or suggestions about what we could be doing to improve what we're doing,
And I get your lunch in once a month.
What I'd like to do is to continue to have conversations with you guys about how you would see yourselves activating Perry Square.
Yeah,
So we meet,
yeah.
Jennifer comes to our meetings on Mondays,
Mm-hmm.
but, I think that would be really
Yeah.
interesting thing for us all to talk about,
Mhm.
flesh out some ideas and some
some people said you wish that there were more people here, and I had been sounding this call saying that, you know, with the shrinking of the local newspaper, that it's really hard to, you know, how are we communicating with people? But I was thinking about a lot of the times in the park, the people you see are veterans, and I still wear a bunch of hats, even though I'm not on city council anymore. And so I work at the library, and I just heard that the library, Lincoln, is going to be having something about homeless veterans. The library's been sponsoring it, but they're using the space there. So kind of far removed from the guys who are hanging out here at Square, but how do we let people know that these things are going on? So that, I don't know which group is doing it though. The manager of Lincoln was email me and let me know about that. But I just think that's a particular group that seems to be down there, you know.
So sorry, it's Richmond, right?
Rich for with an
Richmond.
F. Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to get somebody, their manager or something, to
Yeah.
one of our
Yeah.
downtown meetings.
I think that would be
Since
really
you
great.
have, since
Mm-hmm.
you have a connection.
They would be eager to participate.
So